Welcome in to the Real Matrix. I'm the Angry Patriot, and glad to have you in. It's our third show. If you're listening to podcasts, probably going to be our fifth or sixth podcast. Not sure how we're going to do that yet, but so just to go over quickly what we've been doing on the show. As I've said, I think we're basically living in the real Matrix. And in show 2, we talked about how the world elite that owns pretty much everything. I mean, the super, super wealthy that own most everything, the investment firms, bankers, anyone associated with any federal banks, not only in this country, but worldwide. They have and control all the money. They control the corporations. And they're basically running the country, the world as they seem fit, as they please. So I said last week I'm going to show one of the most dastardly lies we've been told, and the premise of the show early on was we've been lied about everything. Everything's propaganda. Everything we've been told is really not the truth. It's not reality. So I'm about to tell you, and strap up, get your seatbelt on. I'm about to tell you and show you. Forget about telling you. I mean, my thoughts are meaningless. I'm just an average Joe. But for the next hour, I'm going to play you clips from experts that are going to show you that by the laws of physics, the Twin Towers that were brought down on 9/11 could not have been brought down the way they have. They were brought down by controlled demolition. The only way that would have had to been done was they would have been pre-wired. It wasn't an airplane crashing into it. So when again, when I first saw and heard and realized this information, I felt like Neo in the Matrix, thinking, what's the reality? You become very confused. So I understand. There's going to be some of you that are along with this, that go along. You're like, yes, we were behind 9/11. Yeah. For those of you, you can skip ahead, but really you probably want to watch this because you can use these shows to show your friends who are unfamiliar, don't know this information, have no idea about this information. You can use this information to educate them, to make them realize that our government has lied to us about what I think is the most traumatic event in American history. And for them to be in charge of the investigation and then come up with the reason they came up with of why those buildings came down, you realize they're covering it up. They're part of the cover-up. And what do they say? The cover-up's always worse than the actual event itself. Well, I don't know. It's all bad, but we must be involved in all of it. And I'm going to go into, we're going to be very exhaustive on this subject because, again, 9/11, I don't know how, we all knew if you were alive then, you know where you were, you knew how you felt. It was the Kennedy assassination. My mother, people in that generation, they always knew where they were when they heard Kennedy got assassinated. I think everyone remembers where they were when they heard about 9/11 and the buildings going into towers and the buildings falling. It was really the most traumatic event in our nation's history. And when you think, if you come to the realization that we were behind it, then you're really coming to the gist of the show, which is, are we really living in the real Matrix? Because if they can do that, what can't they do? And in shows coming up in the future, we have so much information, we're not going to run out of it, that we're going to show you that other events that you've heard one narrative is again lies. I'll briefly mention Oklahoma City bombing. I'll briefly mention the fires in Maui, the fires in LA, all of this going on. This is our government really attacking us as citizens, attacking our way of life, attacking our freedoms, and in the process, they're trying to control us with government power. So, getting back to the 9/11. So, if you're unaware, I'll give you a brief, quick history. NIST, which is the National Institute for Standards and Technology, I think it is, they were the ones in charge of the investigation. It's a form of our government, an arm of our government. And they said the towers came down because of fire. And all 3 buildings, they said, came down because of fire. When I say 3 buildings, you might say 3 buildings. You might not even be aware that a 3rd building came down that day. It's probably stationed about 100 yards from the 2 twin towers, but it was called World Trade Center Building Number 7. So, Building Number 7, it was a 40-some floor building, skyscraper, that came down and was not hit by any airplanes. It was hit by slight debris, but it certainly didn't cause damage. And that building came down in a free fall time of about 8 seconds, 7 to 8 seconds. That building came down, and it came down without any damage. And the fires that were in it were just office fires. We're going to get into this more with experts telling you how that can't happen. And if you're unaware of that, what you need to do here with this show, you need to collect the information, add it all up in your head, and say, how does the narrative that our government told us that fires brought down the building, how does it make sense? How they say the fires brought down the buildings, they said it heated up the steel started to melt, started to bend, started to weaken, and then the building just collapsed on itself because the steel girders and the structure of the building became weakened, and it collapsed because of fire. Well, I tell you what, I'm going to show you information. You make your own opinion. Is that possible? Could that have happened? We'll play the first clip right now.
NIST would have us to believe that these was a typical office fire, scattered office fires, if you will, that brought this building down. Since the mid-'60s, I've tried to follow high-rise fires because they're something we worry a lot about as we design these buildings. And I'm not aware of any high-rise building that have come down as a result of fires.
The coup de grace for me was when I found out that Building 7 had collapsed later that day. And when I saw
there's a picture of it.
Building 7 come down, to me, the fact that it looks like a perfect controlled demolition of an intact.
So you see the picture of the building coming down. We'll show you more of that. But that was a large building that came down. It looked like controlled demolition. It looked like, how's that building come down? There was no raging fires. There was no smoke. There was no damage to the building. How does that happen? Again, in the earlier shows, we showed how they control the narrative. They control the media. They control the information we receive. So if they control that, they control the message, the media, the news. If they tell you, oh, it came down with fire, it came down because of fire, the steel was weakened and melted, how would you know different? How would you know? This is how dastardly the situation we're in. The Matrix. They control the message. They tell us one thing. We don't know any different unless we really go deep into it and try to find this information out on our own. Again, we're busy. Most people don't have time for this during their normal lives. I'm here to provide it. You tell me where I'm wrong, or tell me where these guys are wrong. Let's go to the next clip.
World Trade Center 7 collapsed because of fires fueled by office furnishings. It did not collapse from explosives or from fuel oil fires.
So that was the NIST lead investigator. You heard him. If you're playing it here on Robat TV, you can play it back. Hear it again. Hear what he had to say. If you're doing a podcast, you can play it again. He said they came down because of fires. Next clip. You can realize that they're out of their minds.
High-rise buildings simply do not collapse due to fire. There has never been until 9/11 an experience where a high-rise building that was steel frame completely collapsed. There have been fires burned longer in similar structures without any collapse.
This claims the fires were very large, very hot, and long-lasting, when in reality, observation, which has been researched by many people, shows these fires did not last very long. They were not in the locations where NIST claims they were at given times.
I also think people probably understand and realize the fact that steel buildings or steel girders or buildings have used to, when this building was built, it had asbestos in it, which is fire retardant, flame retardant. So even if the fire got super, super hot, you have that restrictive barrier to make sure nothing gets damaged or compromised by fire. As a matter of fact, and like he said, and I don't remember exactly what he said, but point is, there's not a lot of fuel in a building that's actually going to create a super hot fire. It's not like it's a forest in there. It's not like there's wood everywhere, or gasoline, or fuel for a fire. Again, I want to point out, if you say, well, it was jet fuel in there, we'll probably show here later someone, and so I'm jumping the gun, but just to answer your question, what's going on in your head if you're listening, jet fuel, when the airplanes went in and exploded, that jet fuel was burned up in seconds. It's not like the jet fuel was there and continued to go on. It was a big boom. That jet fuel was burned off immediately. So the idea of fire bringing down a metal, know this, in the history of mankind, from what we're taking from investigators, the only buildings that came down, the only metal, steel, fabricated buildings that came down because of fire were the 3 buildings on 9/11, because that's what we're told. But it's never happened anywhere else. And there's been raging fires elsewhere in high-rise buildings. So be aware of that. Next clip.
Later in the day, when World Trade Center 7 collapsed, they had already showed us pictures of a few fires in that building, and I mean, they weren't even raging. And how could that cause a building to collapse as if it were imploded? Couldn't happen.
For those that are listening on podcasts, you might need to pull up our video and see this. We'll actually, maybe at the end of the show, we'll show you where you can see this video on your own. But the pictures that you see there are factual. There was only a couple floors where there was fires, and they were separate floors. It wasn't like a raging fire that engulfed the whole building. It was a 40-plus story building that there was maybe 2 or 3 floors of fires. How does that bring down a metal building? We said before in earlier shows, use your critical thinking. How can a metal, steel, fabricated building come down by office fires that don't get that hot? Next clip.
The majority of the jet fuel was burnt up instantly in the big fireball, and it was gone. The fires that were left were office furnishings and carpet and things like that. A lot of things in these kind of buildings have to be fire resistant by nature. It's required by code. So there really isn't a whole lot of fuel in there to begin with.
The media portrayed these fires as being extremely hot, but the fires were not that hot in World Trade Center 1 and 2. If you look at the NIST zone data, you could see this. And to use our own powers of observation, you could tell by seeing these fires and seeing black smoke come out the windows. That means that the fires were oxygen starved, and it was incomplete combustion. And so it was a low temperature fire.
I looked up in a manual the burning temperature of jet fuel and found that under the conditions that existed at the World Trade Center on 9/11, that jet fuel had to have been burning at about 750 degrees Fahrenheit. I also noticed that the official explanation of what happened there was that the heat from the fire supposedly softened the steel and thereby brought the buildings down. If you have a flame at 750 degrees, you can hold that flame under a steel beam forever, and you'll never reach a high enough temperature to bend steel, let alone melt it. So immediately I knew at that point that the official explanation was dead wrong.
So folks, if you didn't catch all of that, replay that. And that's just simple laws of physics. That jet fuel burns, what do you say, 700 degrees, 800, let's say 1,000 degrees. Metal melts or starts to denigrate or starts to have structural issues at 2,700 degrees. 2,700 degrees, 2,700 degrees. As what he just said, you could pump jet fuel into the Twin Towers. You could have pumped it in there, and the metal would have never been compromised, ever. I mean, when you hear that fact, you tell me, how did our government, NIST, how did our investigators come up with that conclusion unless they were covering up the truth? That's our government. How's that happen? Now this is, I'm going to show you over the course of the next couple shows, that this is not just one fact. There is fact after fact after fact, information, truth after truth after truth. Add them all up. First fact: jet fuel couldn't make a fire that high. If you didn't see in the clip, that office furnishings burn at about 550 degrees. Okay. That's hot when he said it's not that hot. Well, that's hot. I wouldn't want to be in a fire that's 500 degrees. Stick your head in an oven that's it's broiling at 500 degrees. You're not going to want to be in that very long. But the fact remains, when your oven gets 500 degrees, the stove, the oven, the steel in the oven doesn't melt. You could have that oven on for 500 degrees for the whole month, and rack up a big electrical bill and never have any problems with your steel in your stove, your oven, or anything around your kitchen. 500 degrees is hot, but not when it comes to potentially compromising a steel girder in your building, in a metal high-rise building. Can't happen. Next clip.
Planning and engineering firm. One of the things that really interested me is how quickly the Tower 7 fell. It fell within 7 seconds approximately from top to bottom. This building was built in the mid-'80s and met all the codes at the time.
So he's again stating a building that didn't have any structural damage due to any airplanes hitting it might have had building pieces from the towers that blew up and fired out at it. And we'll get to that later in this show, how building just didn't collapse, but building actually, pieces were sent areas away from the Twin Towers. did see some damage there, but how did the building come straight down? You would think if one part of the building was damaged, that it would kind of lean over and fall that way, but to come straight down? Again, I think that's impossible. If you think that's possible, I would love to hear from you how that could happen. Because these are architects and engineers throughout the country, throughout the world, that have looked at this information and said, this couldn't happen. And the video that I'm showing from, it's from a list, it's from a group that calls themselves Architects and Engineers in regards to 9/11. And there's over 1,500 of them, 1,500 experts that are all in agreement that the information that we've been told is incorrect. And it couldn't have happened that way. If you're an architect or engineer out there that don't see it their way, we'd love to hear from you. But we'll go on forward. Next clip.
Essentially, in less than 7 seconds, Tower 7 came down upon itself.
It's just like taking your car keys out and just dropping them. That's how fast the building came down, for over 100 feet. And the only way you can get that is when there's zero resistance. And so what we're looking at is a building just coming straight down, falling right through itself with zero resistance. Buildings don't have zero resistance, which is why you feel comfortable walking into a building.
This building had 40,000 tons of structural steel in its structural system, and that is intended to keep it from going anywhere.
NIST is telling us that the building below it ceased to exist for the first few seconds of the collapse of the building. Well, things in physics just don't cease to exist and cease to resist the forces that are on them. The building didn't disappear so the building can fall for 100 feet at free fall speed. That's impossible. That's a violation of the fundamental law of physics that says that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction.
If floors fall, they tend to fall and are braced by the floor directly beneath it. And there's some delay there.
Because of redundancy, because of all the other columns in the building that were not affected.
Even if a floor were to collapse, it still wouldn't be able to collapse all of the connections simultaneously at the rate that it did without secondary explosion.
I have nothing really more to add. It's just as the guy said, it's the laws of physics. What they said the reason was for that building to come down, Building 7, could not have happened. Laws of physics. That's all I hear, and I'm just using my head. Again, I would welcome a different answer if someone has one out there. Next clip.
If the buildings had come down by fire, we would have seen a more natural progression of collapse.
And clearly
If the buildings had come down by fire, we would have seen a more natural progression of collapse.
And clearly a more asymmetrical pattern should have been present.
The symmetry is the smoking gun. It cannot happen that when you have asymmetric damage, you will get a perfectly symmetrical collapse.
The exterior columns on the outside as well as on the inside at the bottom would have to be severed almost at the same time.
I worked for Controlled Demolition Incorporated, CDI, the top-rated explosives demolition firm in the world. What I saw, it was a classic implosion. The center of the core, the penthouse area, starts to move first, and then the building follows along with it. That's another indicator that this NIST report is very suspect.
When it's all finished, the outside walls are piled one on top of the other right in the middle of the building. Just like a house of cards if it were coming down.
According to NIST, the failure occurred at column 79 on level 12. This means basically they're talking about a single columnar collapse or failure that resulted in a total collapse of the building. That just does not make any sense.
It's almost comical. What he was saying there is the end. The NIST report actually points to this one column, and there's probably, 100 columns in that building. That one column was compromised, and the whole metal building came down? Can you imagine if that was absolutely possible? I'd never go into a metal building. I'd never go into a skyscraper. It just it doesn't happen that way. I mean, it defies the laws of physics, defies the laws of gravity, defies the laws of reason or reality. Let's continue on with more clips.
The explanations from FEMA and from NIST don't add up. But there is enormous circumstantial evidence, circumstantial and actually physical evidence as well, that would lead us to a different conclusion. And the conclusion is controlled demolition.
Well, we're running out of time before we hit commercial break, but let's hear a little bit more about exactly what probably happened, which was controlled demolition. Next clip.
The only way that a building can accelerate as it collapses is by having pre-engineered, precisely timed, and precisely placed explosives. In other words, controlled demolition.
So you saw the buildings came down, if you've seen pictures of it, if you remember it then. Those buildings came down basically free fall also. It was over 100 floor building, which came down in 10 seconds. I mean, you would think that something would slow it down if the whole building wasn't compromised. The only way to compromise the whole building is to put electrical charges and explosive charges in the building, bang them off and set them off, and then the building's definitely going to be weakened and it's going to come down. That how they do it, how these engineers and demolition artists do it, not my game. That way above my intelligence level. But I'm observant enough to know I've seen buildings demoed before, and I've seen the 9/11 towers come down. It's a striking resemblance. Again, I'm not Einstein, but if I woke up, there was no snow when I went to bed, and I woke up and there's snow on the ground in the morning. I don't have to be Einstein to realize probably snowed that night. So I tell you what, in regards to controlled demolition, you would think, well, there's a bunch of explosions. We really weren't told of any explosions in the media when this happened. But on the other side of the break, we'll go over what people heard, what information is out there that was maybe suppressed from us, and we'll continue on our journey here at The Real Matrix.
Want to make your love life sizzle like a Phoenix summer? Summit Male Medical guarantees to help you with ED or premature issues, or we won't charge you. We've helped tens of thousands of patients here in the Valley since 2008. Please compare our most experienced medical staff and low-price treatments to anybody. If you've talked to the rest, it's time to come to the best. Put the sizzle back in your love life. 480-398-1000 or go to summitmalemedical.com. Summit Medical, love for life.